Snow fell quietly, layering the forest in silver. The Montana wilderness was as silent as a cathedral. Every pine needle, every frozen branch stood still, listening. A lone cabin sat on the edge of a frozen lake, smoke drifting from its chimney in a thin, fragile thread. Inside, Elena Brooks cleaned the barrel of a long-range rifle with slow, deliberate motions. Her hands were steady, too steady for an ordinary woman living alone in the woods. Elena wasn't ordinary. She hadn't been for years. Once, she had worn the uniform of a U.S. Army Sniper 2nd Recon, 75th Regiment. Her record was clean, her aim legendary, her nerve unshakable. They called her Whisper because her targets never heard her coming. But that was another life, one buried beneath classified reports, sealed missions, and a dozen broken bones that told stories she refused to remember. Now, the woman who once moved through war zones unseen lived in a wooden cabin surrounded by snow, with only her German shepherd, Scout, for company. She spent her days chopping wood, fishing through the ice, and scanning the tree lines, not for enemies, she told herself, but for peace. Yet even here, where silence ruled, she could never silence the hum in her chest, the feeling that something was still hunting her. That morning began like any other. She poured coffee into a chipped mug, wrapped her coat tighter, and sat by the window facing the forest. Scout dozed at her feet, his ears twitching with every crack of the wind. The peace was too perfect. It always was before something broke it. Then it came, a faint electronic chirp from a wooden chest in the corner of the cabin. Elena froze. No one should have been able to reach that device. She had buried it under 3 layers of encryption, and it hadn't made a sound in 5 years. The sound was sharp and distinct, like a heartbeat skipping inside a metal box. Slowly, she opened the chest. Inside lay an old encrypted military pager, its screen flickering to life for the first time since Afghanistan. Incoming ping, code 77A. Source, unknown. Elena's throat tightened. No, she whispered, her voice low, almost trembling. Not after all this time. Scout raised his head and let out a low growl, staring at the window. Elena's instincts flared awake, the same instincts that had saved her life countless times. She turned off the lights, grabbed her rifle, and moved to the back door. The snow outside glowed faintly under the pale sun. Her footprints from earlier were already fading. But new ones, faint, recent, crossed her boundary line about 200 meters out. She wasn't imagining it. Someone was here. For a long moment, she crouched behind the porch beam, scanning the tree line through her scope. Nothing, only the whispering wind. But she knew the signs. Slight displacements in the snow, shadows too deliberate, silence too absolute. Whoever they were good. Too good, she muttered. Her mind flashed back to Kandahar, the last mission, the one that erased her name from every database. She had been deployed with 6 others, deep behind enemy lines, tracking a high-value target connected to an illegal weapons route. But the mission had gone to hell. A group of mercenaries, Raven Squad, ambushed them. Elena's bullet had ended their leader's life, but her entire team was slaughtered in the chaos that followed. Officially, the report listed her as Kia. Unofficially, she had disappeared. The military didn't look for her, and she never looked back. Until now. Elena crouched behind a birch tree, rifle steady, her eyes narrowing. Whoever was out there knew she was alive, and they wanted her gone. But there was something off about their approach. No radio chatter, no light, no mistakes. Professionals, possibly military. She took a breath, slow and controlled. Scout, she whispered. The dog moved beside her, silent as a shadow. If I don't make it back, you run. A branch cracked in the distance. deliberate, a lure. She smiled faintly. Nice try. Dropping low, she moved left, circling wide through the trees, boots barely leaving prints. Her breath fogged in short bursts, but her focus was razor-sharp. Through the snow-dusted branches, she spotted movement. A glint of metal, a scope, someone scanning the ridge. He was good, but not good enough. She steadied her rifle. One shot, one breath. Then she stopped herself. Not yet. She needed to know who they were. She shifted position, observing. The man's uniform had no insignia, plain tactical black. His earpiece flashed blue, faintly visible under his balaclava. A second figure moved behind him, then a third. A team. 6 men. 6, the same number as Raven's squad, but that was impossible. She exhaled, cold mist curling around her face. "You've got to be kidding me," she murmured. "You never learned." The men moved tactically, advancing toward her cabin. One of them carried a portable scanner. He was tracking something. Her signal. The pager had baited her. They'd pinged it to trace her location. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't a hunt. It was a trap. Elena moved fast, covering ground through the snow. She climbed a small ridge overlooking her cabin, took position, and aimed. Through her scope, she watched one of them breach the cabin door. A flashbang went off inside, white smoke spilling out. Scout barked from a distance. She had trained him to stay clear of gunfire. Seconds later, a figure shouted, "Clear." "Empty," Elena smiled grimly. Wrong move. The next moment, her trigger squeezed, crack, and one man fell instantly. The others dove for cover, confusion rippling through the team. She didn't shoot again. She wanted them guessing. "Sniper," one shouted. 200 meters out. "Negative," another barked. "She's closer." Their leader raised his hand, signaling silence. His posture was calm, deliberate. This wasn't panic. This was someone who had hunted before. Elena adjusted her scope and zoomed in on his face. He turned slightly, revealing sharp features, a thin scar along his jaw. Recognition hit her like a bullet. Major Colt Mercer. A name from her past, an instructor at sniper school, a legend in his own right. Cold, brilliant, merciless. He had taught her the art of patience. And now, he was leading the team sent to kill her. "Elena Brooks," he called out, his voice cutting through the wind. "You're a hard woman to find." She didn't answer. She stayed perfectly still, watching, listening. Mercer's tone was calm, almost respectful. "You know how this goes. We've got orders. You come in quiet, we make it clean. No one has to die today." Elena smirked. "That's what they said last time." She whispered it to herself, not to him, but her voice carried faintly through the open air. Mercer froze. Then slowly, he smiled. "So it's true. The ghost still talks." The forest fell into silence again, a silence that no one dared break. Elena pulled back from her scope, heartbeat steady. This was no longer about survival. This was unfinished business. The game had begun. She whispered to Scout, "Stay low, buddy. Looks like we're back in it." Her finger brushed the trigger again, but she didn't fire. She had something better in mind, a message. She chambered a single round and fired not at the team, but at the tree beside Mercer. The bullet exploded the bark inches from his head. He didn't flinch. "All right," he muttered, voice low. "Guess we're doing this your way." Elena smiled faintly as she reloaded, the forest echoing with a single haunting whisper, the sound of a hunter awakening. And in that frozen silence, a new war began. The echo of that single gunshot still lingered among the trees. Smoke curled gently from Elena's rifle, as the six-man team vanished into the white forest. She knew they wouldn't retreat. Men like Mercer never did. They would circle, regroup, adapt. That's what made them dangerous. But Elena wasn't the same soldier they remembered. She was something else now. Colder, quieter, a survivor carved from regret. She retreated deeper into the woods, blending with the landscape. The forest was her domain. Every slope, every ridge, every hollow was a part of her map, one she had memorized over years of isolation. She crouched under an old pine, pulling out a waterproof notebook filled with scrawled coordinates and sketches. "They're coming from the north ridge," she murmured, marking positions. "Standard pincer." She almost smiled. Predictable. Scout lay beside her, ears twitching. His eyes followed her hand movements. He understood the rhythm of preparation. She reached over, scratching behind his ear. "They trained me to be a ghost," she whispered. "Now they'll wish they hadn't." As she checked her ammunition, a memory flashed, sharp, bright, and cruel. Afghanistan, Kandahar, 2016, dust storms and gunfire. Her team, Alpha Recon 7, was deep behind enemy lines on Operation Lantern. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate a suspected weapons pipeline run by rogue contractors. But the reality was chaos. They had been ambushed by Raven Squad, a private military outfit working both sides of the war. Elena had been their Overwatch sniper, perched a mile out with a perfect view. She remembered her CO's voice crackling through the comms. "We've got eyes on target. Confirm visual." "Target locked," Elena replied. "Ready to engage." The shot she fired that day was perfect, center mass, through a dust storm at 1,400 meters. The kind of shot legends are made of. But legends come with blood. The target fell, and then everything exploded, literally. Raven Squad retaliated with coordinated mortar fire. Elena's team was pinned. Her spotter was killed instantly, and she barely escaped with shrapnel wounds across her ribs. She could still feel the heat, the ringing in her ears, the cries of her team through broken radios. When extraction arrived, the world thought she was dead. Command confirmed it, sealed the files, erased her existence. But as she lay bleeding, under a collapsed wall, she saw something that would never leave her. Major Mercer, standing beside the bodies, speaking to a man in civilian clothes. A handshake, a suitcase. That was the moment she realized she wasn't supposed to survive. Back in the present, Alana's breath fogged against the cold air. That memory, the handshake, the betrayal, burned sharper now that Mercer was here. Why him? Why now? The pager, the signal. It was all bait, a way to confirm she was alive. She adjusted her rifle scope, scanning through the snow-laden trees. Mercer's team had gone dark, no movement, no chatter. They were professionals, using radio silence to stay hidden. But she had learned to read the silence too. Every still branch, every unnatural absence of sound told her where they were. She found the first one, a glint of glass, the edge of a rifle scope. She didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, she pulled back and started setting her traps. The snow was her camouflage, the terrain, her weapon. She used fishing wire to rig small explosives to natural choke points, tree trunks, rocks, roots, simple but effective. The forest would turn into a labyrinth of death once they moved closer. Hours passed. The light began to fade. The temperature dropped below freezing, coating the trees in icy crystals. Elena crouched under a ridge, eating a protein bar, keeping her breathing steady. The silence was almost peaceful again. Then, a voice broke through the static of an old frequency in her earpiece. "You always were hard to kill, Brooks." Her blood ran cold. Mercer's voice, calm, composed, and far too close. "You should have stayed dead." She froze, scanning the tree line. He was using her own com frequency, the same encryption her unit used years ago. That meant he'd kept her file, her codes. He'd planned this for a long time. Elena replied quietly, "Still teaching your students to shoot ghosts, Major?" A low chuckle echoed in her earpiece. "You were my best. Shame you forgot which side you were on." "I didn't forget," she said, voice low and steady. "I just stopped believing the side I was on was the right one." A pause. "Then, you're not walking out of these woods, Elena. Don't make me finish what should have been done years ago." The line went dead. Elena sat still, eyes scanning the snow. Mercer wasn't bluffing. He was close. But this wasn't fear. It was something colder, clarity. She whispered to herself, "If he wants ghosts, he'll get one." Night fell completely now. The moonlight painted everything blue and silver. In the distance, faint movement, a figure creeping low between trees. One of Mercer's men. She waited until he passed near a small ridge. Then a click, and a buried tripwire detonated. Snow exploded upward in a white flash, followed by silence. Scout barked once, sharp and loud. "Quiet," Elena whispered, patting his side. "We're just getting started." Through her scope, she saw flashlights flicker. The teen was scattering, confused. Mercer's voice cut through the coms again, harsh this time. "Hold formation. She's watching us." He was right. She was. Elena's pulse didn't rise. It steadied. She shifted her aim, took a long, slow breath, and squeezed the trigger. The second man dropped instantly, his rifle clattering against a frozen stump. The rest dove for cover, shouting into the snow. "Sniper! East Ridge! Negative! She's flanking us!" They didn't understand. She wasn't on the ridge anymore. She was moving, constantly, ghost-like, unpredictable. For every shot they thought they'd located, she'd already vanished to another position. Mercer realized it first. He shouted, "She's drawing us out! Fall back! Fall back!" Too late. Another explosion thundered through the forest, one of her traps triggered by a hasty retreat. Flames burst from the snow, lighting up the night for just a moment. When silence returned, only 3 of Mercer's men were still moving. Elena wiped snow from her rifle scope and whispered, "3 left. And you, Mercer." She knew he could hear her, not through comms, but through instinct. The way soldiers feel each other on a battlefield. She backed away into the trees, heading toward her secondary hideout deeper in the valley. The plan was working. Draw them in, separate them, dismantle them piece by piece. But as she reached the ravine, her earpiece crackled again. "You really think this ends here?" Mercer's voice was softer now, almost nostalgic. "You never understood the game, Elena. You're not the only one who learned from Afghanistan." Elena's steps faltered. Her instincts screamed. She dove behind a log just as a drone's hum sliced through the air. Red lights swept the snow, searching. So that was his play, technology versus instinct. She cursed under her breath, slinging her rifle and running low through the trees. The drone fired once, the explosion ripping through a pine trunk behind her. Shrapnel tore her sleeve, but she kept moving, rolling down a slope and landing hard. Pain surged, but she ignored it. Pain meant she was alive. The drone circled, but her forest was too dense for it to follow long. She grabbed a flare from her pack, cracked it open, and tossed it across the snow to distract the sensors. The red light lured the drone just long enough for her to aim and shoot. The bullet struck true. The machine spiraled down in flames. Silence again. Smoke, wind, breath. Elena leaned against a tree, clutching her shoulder. Her blood stained the snow. She exhaled, the memory of Afghanistan flooding her again. Fire, betrayal, death. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was justice. Mercer had come to bury a ghost. But ghosts, she thought, don't die easy. She pressed a hand to her wound, lifted her rifle, and whispered into the cold, "Your move, Major." Washington, D.C., 2 days before the first shot in the Montana wilderness. Inside a windowless conference room, buried beneath an intelligence annex, the hum of fluorescent lights drowned out the tension. A red folder lay open on the table, stamped classified, termination authorized. The woman holding it, Director Evelyn Hayes, didn't blink as she read the top line. Target: Brooks Elena A., former Army recon sniper. Status: presumed dead. Operation: Lantern 2016. Authorization: Code Black. Across the table sat Major Colt Mercer, his posture rigid, his jaw tight. He had seen dozens of missions like this, but this one stung. "She's not a terrorist," he said quietly. Hayes didn't look up. "She's a liability. She has information that can't be allowed to surface." "Information you buried," Mercer muttered. Her gaze lifted sharply. "Careful, Major. You were part of Lantern. You know the stakes." Mercer leaned forward, voice low. "Lantern wasn't a mission. It was a cover-up. We were ordered to hit an asset that didn't exist. We killed civilians. You told us it was enemy combatants." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "And that's why this operation is necessary. Brooks has the files. If she talks, she doesn't just expose Lantern. She exposes you too." He clenched his fists. "So this is cleanup. You can call it that." She slid the folder across the table. "You and your team leave in 48 hours. You know her skill set. Treat her like a Tier 1 threat. Because if she's alive, she'll be coming for all of us." Mercer didn't respond. He just stood, tucked the folder under his arm, and walked out without saluting. The next day, he assembled his unit, 5 of the best former operators money could buy. Hawk, the tracker. Riley, demolitions. Banks, communications. Ortiz, close quarters. And Vance, a quiet, deadly marksman. They met in a hangar outside Seattle, prepping gear and studying satellite maps of the Montana wilderness. Hawk scanned the terrain. No roads within 10 miles. "She's living completely off the grid." Riley grinned. "She's one of us. Makes it fun." Vance said nothing, just cleaned his rifle, slow and precise. Mercer stared at the map. "You underestimate her or you die. She's not paranoid, she's patient. That forest is her home, and we're the intruders." Ortiz smirked. "Come on, Major. 6 of us against 1 woman? We're overkilling this." Mercer didn't even look up. "You ever face her in a match?" Ortiz paused. "No." Then shut up. The hangar fell silent again, except for the click of metal and the rasp of cleaning cloth on steel. Mercer finally spoke, voice low. "She doesn't miss. She doesn't hesitate. And she doesn't forgive." Riley scoffed. "You talk like you admire her." "I do," Mercer replied. "That's what makes this job hell." Back in the Montana wilderness, present day, snow continued to fall in thick waves, cloaking the forest in silence. The bodies of 2 of Mercer's men lay buried under white drifts, claimed by the cold. Mercer crouched beside a tree, examining a bullet hole in a fallen branch. Clean entry, no overpenetration. A match to a .338 Lapua round. Elena's signature. "She's using her old rifle," he muttered. "That means she's confident." Hawk crouched beside him. "We've lost 2 already. You want to call for extraction?" Mercer shook his head. "If we pull out, she follow. And she'll finish the job on her terms. So what's the play?" Mercer looked up through the snow. "We stop thinking like hunters. Start thinking like prey. She'll expect aggression. Instead, we vanish. Force her to move first. Miles away, Elena was moving through the same forest, blood still seeping through her sleeve from the drone shrapnel. She'd patched it with duct tape and gauze. It wasn't the worst injury she'd had, but the ache was constant. She couldn't afford weakness. Her mind replayed Mercer's voice over and over. "You should have stayed dead." She'd seen enough cover-ups to know what those words really meant. The government wanted her gone because she had proof. Back in Kandahar, before her team was wiped out, she'd copied encrypted intel onto a drive hidden in her rifle case. It contained communication logs, satellite records, evidence of a covert deal between U.S. officials and private contractors that fueled both sides of the conflict. And now, Hayes wanted it buried forever. Elena opened her survival pack and pulled out a small case. Inside was the drive, scratched, worn, but intact. She clenched her jaw. "You'll never get it," she whispered. Scout nuzzled her side. She gave him a faint smile. "Time to change the game, boy." That night, Mercer's camp was a quiet ring of tents hidden in a low ravine. The fire burned low to avoid detection. The remaining 4 men sat in silence, tension coiling through every muscle. Hawk broke it first. "We shouldn't be sitting still. She's moving while we're doing nothing." Mercer didn't look up from the map. "That's what she wants you to think." Banks adjusted his radio scanner, picking up faint interference. "Could be her signal." "Or bait," Mercer said flatly. Riley exhaled, restless. "This is insane, man. We're hunting a ghost." Mercer stared into the darkness. "No, she's hunting us. The question is, how soon does she strike?" As if on cue, a faint whistle cut through the trees. Then, crack. Banks jerked backward, blood spraying across the snow. No one had even seen the flash. "Contact!" Hawk yelled, diving behind a boulder. Riley fired blindly into the tree line. "I don't see her." Mercer grabbed his scope, scanning. Nothing. Only the whisper of snow falling. Another shot. Precise. Deliberate. Riley dropped next, a hole clean through his visor. 2 left. Hawk shouted, "We need air support." Mercer ignored him. His breathing slowed, his soldier's calm returning. He could almost feel her, not through sight, but instinct. The forest was her body, her weapon. She was close. "Eyes up." He snapped. "She's flanking." They rotated positions, but it was too late. A flashbang rolled into the camp, detonating with a blinding light. Hawk screamed, clutching his face. Mercer hit the ground, covering his eyes. When the light faded, Hawk was gone, dragged into the trees. His muffled scream echoed once, then silence. Mercer's heart pounded. He raised his rifle, scanning every angle. His men were gone. Just him now. "She's clearing the board," he muttered. A voice drifted through the fog, soft but unmistakable. "You taught me patience, Major." Mercer spun, aiming at the sound, but there was nothing there. Only the wind. "You taught me control." He turned again. His finger tightened on the trigger. "But you never taught me mercy." A gunshot split the silence. Crack. The bullet missed him by inches, shattering a tree trunk beside his head. Mercer ducked low, rolling behind a log. "You want me, Brooks?" "Come take me." He switched his radio. "Director Hayes, this is Mercer. The target's alive. 4 men down." Static. Then Hayes's voice came through, icy calm. "Then finish it, Major. No loose ends." He looked at the radio, fury flashing in his eyes. "You set us up. You knew she'd be waiting." No response. Just static. He shut off the radio and stared into the dark. "All right," he whispered. "No loose ends." Elena watched him through her scope from a ridge 200 meters away. He was alone now, cornered, calculating, dangerous. She could end it with one shot. But she didn't. Not yet. She needed to know why. Why the government wanted her raced. Why Mercer took the job. Why the war never really ended for people like them. Through the snow, their eyes met, hunter and hunter. Mercer raised his rifle slowly, aiming toward her position. He didn't fire. Neither did she. In that frozen silence, they both understood something. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was a reckoning. The forest held its breath as two ghosts stared each other down. The next move would decide who lived and who disappeared forever. The night had teeth. Snow hissed as it fell through the black sky, thick enough to muffle even footsteps. Somewhere in that white silence, two predators stalked each other. One haunted by orders, the other by betrayal. Elena Brooks crouched in the hollow of a fallen cedar, her breath steady despite the cold gnawing at her ribs. She'd been awake for 30 hours straight, but her mind was sharp, calm, the calm of someone who'd lived too long with death as a companion. Through her scope, she watched Mercer drag one of his fallen men's packs into cover. His movements were deliberate, methodical. He was conserving heat, conserving ammo, conserving time. That was Mercer's style. Never panic, never rush. He knew she was still out there. She whispered to Scout, who lay beside her, ears flicking in the wind. "We end this on our terms." The dog wagged its tail once, a silent response. Elena pulled a thin wire from her pouch and began setting the first trap, a tension-triggered claymore, rigged between two birch trees. She'd scavenged it from the men she'd taken down earlier. The explosive's arc was perfect, a cone of destruction aimed at anyone foolish enough to follow her tracks. But this wasn't about killing Mercer. Not yet. It was about breaking him. She moved silently through the forest, laying a pattern of false trails, setting snares that would trigger noise, branches snapping, small firecrackers fizzing through the cold, distractions to draw his attention. Every step, every placement was deliberate. The forest became her chessboard. And Mercer? Her opponent. Mercer sat behind a rock formation, his rifle across his knees. His breath smoked in the freezing air. The forest was alive with ghosts, echoes of movement that weren't real. He'd lost 4 men, and his pride was bleeding. Yet beneath the anger, something colder stirred, respect. "She's turned this into a battlefield," he muttered. "Smart." He switched his scope to infrared, scanning the trees. The snow made it nearly useless. Too much thermal noise. But there were other tells. Disturbed snow, footprints, reflections. Then he saw it. A faint glint 20 meters ahead. Metal. He crouched low, studied the angle, and smiled grimly. Trap. Mercer circled wide, moving low and slow, every muscle trained to silence. When he reached the far side, he spotted the wire, thin, almost invisible, stretching between 2 trees. He disarmed it carefully, pocketing the claymore. "Nice try, Brooks." Then, as he turned the click, a tripwire underfoot. He dove instinctively, rolling into the snow just as a blast ripped through the clearing. The explosion shattered trees and sent fire curling into the air. He hit the ground hard, his ears ringing. Blood trickled from his temple. "Damn it," he hissed. "You got me once." He grabbed his radio. "Command, this is Mercer. Confirming hostile engagement. I need extraction coordinates." Static. Then a voice, but not Hayes's. It was hers. "No extraction coming, Major." Mercer froze. "Brooks, you shouldn't have taken the job." He clenched his jaw. "You think this ends with you walking away?" "Hayes will send another team. Then I'll bury them too." You can't win, Elena. You're one person, and you're already out of time. The line went dead. Mercer stared at the radio, heart hammering. She had tapped their comms. She'd been listening all along. He wiped the blood from his cheek and whispered, "All right then. Let's see who runs out of tricks first." By dawn, the storm had thinned to a light flurry. The forest shimmered under the rising sun, gold against white. Steam rose from Mercer's jacket as he climbed toward higher ground, hoping to gain a vantage point. He was tired, bleeding, and low on ammo, but his instincts hadn't dulled. He moved like a ghost, careful, cautious. Every crunch of snow beneath his boots was a potential death sentence. At the ridge's top, he spotted smoke, faint, curling upward from the valley below. A campfire. "Got you," he murmured. He adjusted his scope, zooming in. There, a small camp, a blanket draped over what looked like a sleeping figure. Her rifle lay beside it. The dog sat near the fire, unmoving. Mercer's pulse quickened. It was too easy. He steadied his breath, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed like thunder. The figure didn't move. A second later, hump. A second explosion tore through the valley. The fire blew outward, scattering snow and smoke. Mercer ducked behind a rock, shielding his face from the blast wave. When the air cleared, he looked again. The camp was gone. The blanket was shredded. The rifle? Just a decoy, a rusted barrel wired to a detonator. And there, etched into the snow beside it, were 5 words written in black charcoal. Who's hunting? Who now? Back in the shadows of the forest, Elena watched him through her scope from half a mile away. The corner of her mouth twitched upward, not a smile exactly, but satisfaction. She'd anticipated his approach, his logic, his patience. Mercer was a soldier who played by rules. She had none. Scout lay beside her, tail flicking. She rubbed his head softly. "He's angry now. That's when he slips." But even as she said it, her hand trembled slightly. She was running out of strength. Her arm wound was worse than she'd admitted. Every movement sent pain lancing through her shoulder. She knew she couldn't outlast him forever. She needed to finish it before she collapsed. She reached into her pack, pulling out the encrypted drive. The small light blinked weakly, still alive, still containing the truth. The files inside were her last bullet. If she could get them out, Hayes's empire would fall. But for that, she needed Mercer. Alive. Mercer reached the base of a ridge, fury and exhaustion bleeding together. His comms were fried, his rations low. Yet his resolve hardened. He thought back to Lantern, that cursed mission in Afghanistan. How they were ordered to eliminate an enemy informant, only to find out afterward that the target had been a journalist. The one person who could have exposed the corruption Hayes was part of. Elena had been there. She'd seen everything. And now she was back from the dead to finish what that journalist started. Mercer stopped walking. The truth hit him like a rifle stock to the gut. Hayes set us both up. He sank to one knee, breathing hard. The war wasn't between him and Elena. It never was. It was between them and the machine that created them. He looked toward the distant tree line where he knew she was watching. "You want Hayes?" he said quietly. "You'll need me alive." He raised his rifle and fired one shot, not at her, but into the air. A signal. A truce. Elena's eyes widened as she heard it. Scout lifted his head. A single shot. No target. No kill. A message. She lowered her rifle, uncertain. The hunter's instinct screamed trap, but her gut whispered something different. She checked her compass, her watch, her surroundings. No flanking moves. No sound of movement. Only silence. "All right, Major," she murmured. "Let's talk." She packed her rifle, slung it across her back, and began moving down the slope, slow, cautious, every step deliberate. The snow beneath her boots whispered like breath. For the first time since the hunt began, the predator stepped into the open. And somewhere below, waiting in the heart of the forest, her enemy, or perhaps her only ally, waited too. The next chapter wouldn't be about bullets. It would be about truth. And truth, Elena knew, was deadlier than any shot she could take. The morning light broke pale and thin across the Montana wilderness, spilling weak gold through the trees. The storm had passed, leaving a silence so deep it seemed the forest itself was holding its breath. Elena Brooks moved cautiously through the snow, rifle lowered but never far from reach. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, stepping into the open, trusting the same man who had come to kill her. But something about Mercer's last action, that single warning shot into the sky, lingered in her mind. It wasn't bait. It was surrender, or something close to it. Scout padded beside her, ears twitching. The dog's nose lifted toward the wind. He caught a scent, low growl rumbling from his chest. Elena whispered, "Easy, boy. If he wanted us dead, he'd have taken the shot already." She stopped near a small clearing, the same one where she'd first ambushed Mercer's team. Now it looked like a graveyard of footprints and blood trails, half buried by new snow. And there, leaning against a pine, rifle slung harmlessly over his shoulder, stood Major Colt Mercer. He looked older than she remembered, his face carved with fatigue, eyes shadowed by loss. But the steadiness was still there. The same unshakable calm that once made soldiers follow him without question. Neither spoke for a long time. The forest filled the silence with creaks and sighs. Finally, Mercer broke it. "Nice shooting back there." Elena's eyes didn't blink. "You're lucky I missed." He gave a tired half-smile. "No, you chose to miss." She didn't answer. Her rifle remained half-raised, her finger resting along the guard. Mercer nodded toward it. "If you were going to pull the trigger, you'd have done it by now. So let's not waste the silence." Elena exhaled slowly. "You came to kill me, Major. 4 of your men are dead. You think I trust your sudden truce?" "I didn't come to trust you," he said evenly. "I came to understand why we were both set up to die." That made her pause. Mercer unslung his rifle and set it on the ground between them, barrel first, a soldier's sign of good faith. Then he raised his hands and stepped back. Elena watched him, every muscle tight. "Talk." He pointed toward the trees behind him. "Operation Lantern. You remember the briefing?" "I remember the lies," she replied. "We were told to neutralize a high-value target, an insurgent financier using journalists as cover. Only after the mission did I find out the financier didn't exist. There was only the journalist." "Laura Nuri," Elena said quietly. The name still burned. She was unarmed. Mercer nodded. "And she was about to publish proof of U.S. contracts with private weapons manufacturers, the ones selling arms to both sides of the conflict. Hayes people," Elena said bitterly. "She built her career on that blood money. And when you found out," Mercer continued, "you copied her files." "I wasn't going to let it die with her," Elena said. "I didn't know who to trust, so I disappeared." Mercer lowered his gaze. "Hayes told us you'd gone rogue, that you were planning to leak classified data to the enemy. So she sent you to clean it up," Elena said, voice sharp as glass. Mercer didn't deny it. "She told me you were a threat to national security. I believed her, until I saw how quickly she signed the kill order. No hesitation. No review." The snow between them glimmered, melting in the rising sun. Elena's jaw clenched. "You killed my team, Mercer." "I followed orders," he said quietly, "and I've lived with that every day since." Her voice trembled, just slightly. "Orders don't absolve you." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." They stood in silence for a long time, two soldiers bound by the same betrayal. Finally, Elena slung her rifle onto her back. It was as close to forgiveness as she could manage. "You have a plan?" she asked. Mercer nodded. "Hayes has a black site not far from here, hidden under the guise of a research facility. That's where she runs off-book operations, the kind that don't make it into official briefings. She's there?" Her last transmission came from that grid. Elena's fingers brushed the flash drive inside her pocket. "Then that's where we finish this." Mercer studied her face, the cold determination in her eyes. "You're not planning to walk away from this, are you?" She didn't answer. He sighed. "I didn't think so." The two of them began moving together, not as comrades, but as uneasy allies. The forest shifted from white to gray as the day wore on. They walked in silence, their footsteps falling in rhythm. Elena noticed the limp in his left leg, an old injury, maybe shrapnel. Mercer noticed the stiffness in her shoulder, the bandaged wound seeping through her sleeve. Both knew the other was hurting, but neither mentioned it. Soldiers didn't waste words on pain. At midday, they stopped to rest under an outcropping of rock. Elena fed Scout a strip of dried meat while Mercer examined the terrain map spread across his knee. He pointed. 2 miles east, there's an old logging road. Hayes's site is built into the ridge just beyond it, guarded by private contractors, not Hermie. That means she's keeping this completely off the books. Elena frowned. "And your extraction?" "There isn't one anymore. Once I stopped checking in, they marked me compromised. So we're both ghosts." Mercer met her gaze. "Yeah, but ghosts can still haunt people." For the first time, Elena almost smiled. As dusk approached, the snow returned, softer now, like a veil descending over the forest. They reached a ridge overlooking a series of metal structures half buried in the snow. Faint light spilled from underground vents. Guards in heavy coats patrolled the perimeter, their rifles slung lazily but ready. Mercer handed her binoculars. "There she is." Through the lenses, Elena saw Director Evelyn Hayes exit the main building. Even at a distance, her posture radiated authority. Spine straight, chin high, eyes scanning the horizon like she owned it. Elena's blood boiled. Hayes spoke to one of the guards, gesturing toward the forest. She was preparing for something, maybe another strike team. Elena lowered the binoculars. "She's nervous." "She should be," Mercer said. "What's our move?" "We get inside." "You still have those files?" Elena nodded. "Encrypted. The only copy. Then we upload them straight into her own system. Once it hits her network, the chain of command will see everything. Lantern, the cover-ups, the payments." Elena looked at him carefully. "And you're helping me because—" Mercer's eyes hardened. "Because I need to make this right. For my men. For the people we killed." She studied him for a long time. Finally, she said, "All right, Major, but if you turn on me again—" He cut her off. "You'll shoot me." "I'd expect nothing less." Night fell. They moved in silence, slipping through the tree line toward the facility. Snow muffled their steps. Their shadows blended with the darkness. Elena handled the approach like a sniper, precise, deliberate. Mercer covered her with a suppressed sidearm, every movement measured. When a guard passed too close, Elena's knife flashed once, silent, efficient. They dragged the body into the snow, leaving no trace. By the time they reached the outer gate, their breath fogged the air in small bursts. Mercer whispered, "After this, there's no going back." Elena checked her rifle, chambered around, and whispered back, "There never was." They slipped inside. Underneath the snow-covered ridge, the facility buzzed with low electrical hums and the faint glow of computer screens. Corridors stretched like veins through the mountain, sterile, metallic, and humming with secrets. They moved quickly, bypassing patrols, disabling cameras. Elena led the way. Mercer followed, watching her back. At the heart of the complex, they found the main server room, a steel door with biometric locks. Mercer held out a stolen access card. "Hayes' deputy. He won't be needing it anymore." The lock clicked. The door opened. Rows of servers lined the room, lights blinking like constellations. Elena stepped forward, inserted the flash drive, and began the upload. Progress bar, 12%, 34%, 57%. Then, "I was wondering when you'd show up." The voice came from the doorway. Evelyn Hayes stood there, calm, unarmed, flanked by 2 guards. Elena froze. Mercer's hand twitched toward his pistol. Hayes smiled. How poetic. 2 ghosts breaking into their own graves. Her eyes locked onto Elena. "You should have stayed dead." Elena stared back, unflinching. "You should have buried your lies deeper." The upload hit 89%. The forest war was over. Now it was a battle of truths, and only one of them would walk out alive. The fluorescent lights flickered, as if even the power grid hesitated to witness what was about to happen. Rows of servers hummed around them, the air heavy with static and adrenaline. The upload bar on the monitor blinked. 89%. 90%. 91%. Elena Brooks kept her eyes on the screen, her rifle hanging loosely from one hand, but ready to rise in an instant. Mercer stood slightly ahead of her, a silent shield between Elena and Director Evelyn Hayes, who had just stepped into the server room flanked by 2 guards. Hayes looked immaculate even underground, her hair perfectly tied, her coat pressed, her calm almost unsettling. She didn't look like someone hiding from justice. She looked like someone who still believed she was untouchable. "Elena Brooks," Hayes said, her voice sharp and cold. "You really don't know when to quit." Elena's response was flat. "And you don't know when you've already lost." Hayes smiled faintly, stepping closer. "You think uploading those files will expose me? You forget who built this system. Everything you see here," she gestured to the glowing servers, "answers to me." The progress bar flickered again. 93%. Mercer's eyes narrowed. Not for long. Hayes's gaze shifted to him. "Ah, the loyal soldier. How disappointing. I expected you to die in the field, not betray your own command." Mercer took a step forward. "You ordered us to kill an unarmed journalist. You lied to every one of us. That's not command. That's murder." Hayes's expression didn't change. "Collateral damage, Major. Necessary sacrifice." 4 of my men are dead," Mercer growled. "And for what? To keep your name clean?" Hayes shrugged slightly. "To keep the country clean. Someone has to make hard choices." Elena raised her rifle. "Funny, the people who say that are never the ones bleeding for it." Hayes's guards reacted instantly, lifting their weapons. In a single motion, Mercer stepped in front of Elena and drew his sidearm. The air between the 4 of them went razor sharp. One wrong twitch, and the room would explode in gunfire. Hayes raised a hand. "Stop, let's not be animals. None of us have to die here." Elena's voice was low, steady. "You killed hundreds to protect your lies. What makes you think you deserve to live?" "Because without people like me," Hayes replied coolly, "people like you would have no war to fight. And without war, what would you even be?" For a moment, silence ruled the room. Then to 95%. Mercer glanced at the screen. Almost done. Hayes saw it too. Her calm cracked. Just a flicker, but enough. She turned sharply toward her guards. Kill the upload. The guards moved. Mercer fired first. One dropped before he reached the terminal. The other swung his rifle toward Elena, but she was faster. A single shot, clean through the chest. The guard hit the floor, his weapon clattering uselessly. The gunfire echoed off the steel walls. Then silence again, except for the low hum of the servers. 97%. Hayes backed toward the door, hand reaching for her coat pocket. Elena's voice cut through the air like a blade. Don't. Hayes froze. Elena took a slow step forward, rifle aimed dead center. You pull that trigger, we both die. Is that how you want this to end? Hayes's lips curled into a faint smile. You still think this is about me, don't you? Elena frowned. What are you talking about? Hayes's fingers tightened around the small remote in her pocket. Lantern was never my operation. I was just the keeper of the secret. You think these files only implicate me? You're about to burn people whose power makes me look like a clerk. Mercer's eyes darted to the screen. 98%. 99%. Elena's heart pounded. Then let it burn. Too late, Hayes said softly. She pressed the remote. The lights flickered. Then, boom! A deep explosion shook the walls. Alarms wailed as emergency lights bathed the corridor in red. The system had triggered a purge, auto-erasing the data. The progress bar froze at 99%. Then the screen went black. No. Elena shouted, slamming her fist against the keyboard. She's wiping the drive. Hayes straightened her coat, calm returning to her voice. You should have stayed hidden, Brooks. You would have lived longer. Mercer stepped forward, grabbing Hayes by the collar. You think this ends with you walking out of here? Hayes met his eyes without flinching. You won't kill me, Major. You're a good soldier. And good soldiers don't execute unarmed women. Elena's voice came from behind him, low, shaking with fury. I'm not a good soldier. Hayes turned just as Elena swung the rifle butt, striking her across the jaw. The director collapsed, blood streaking her lips. Elena stood over her, chest heaving. You destroyed lives. You buried truth under medals and funerals. This isn't about war. It's about you. Hayes spat blood onto the floor. You can't stop it. You can kill me. You can kill every name in those files, and it won't matter. The machine keeps running. Mercer stared down at her, torn between rage and pity. Then we make sure it can't run anymore. He turned to Elena. Backups. Every system has one. There has to be a secondary drive somewhere. Hayes laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You think I'd keep a backup here? Elena crouched beside her, eyes burning. No, but you'd keep one where you feel safe. Hayes's expression faltered, barely perceptible, but enough. Elena caught it instantly. You just told me where. Mercer grabbed Hayes's wrist before she could reach for her sidearm. Where's the backup? Hayes glared at him, silent. Then she whispered, Washington. Sub-level 3. Under my office. Good, Elena said. We'll come collect it. Hayes's smile returned, faint and defiant. You won't make it out of here. Elena tilted her head. You sure? As if on cue, the alarms blared louder. A mechanical voice echoed through the intercom. Facility self-destruct sequence initiated. Detonation in 10 minutes. Mercer's jaw clenched. She wasn't lying. Elena grabbed the flash drive and stuffed it into her pocket. Move! They sprinted through the corridor, alarms wailing around them, sparks raining from ruptured wires. The facility trembled underfoot as explosions began ripping through lower levels. Mercer fired at a locking mechanism, kicking open a blast door. Up the service shaft. Elena followed, Scout barking as flames began crawling down the hall. Smoke choked the air, but adrenaline drove them upward. They climbed the narrow maintenance ladder, metal searing their gloves. Halfway up, the ladder cracked, a tremor splitting the wall beside them. "Go!" Mercer yelled, pushing Elena upward as debris rained down. A pipe burst, scalding steam filling the shaft. Mercer coughed, eyes watering. "Come on, Major," Elena shouted. He climbed after her, lungs burning, every muscle screaming. The shaft ended in a rusted hatch. Elena shoved it open with all her strength. Cold night air flooded in, the scent of pine and smoke. They emerged onto the surface as the ground heaved beneath them. The entire hillside erupted in fire, the underground base collapsing in on itself. They rolled through the snow, covering their heads as the explosion tore through the forest. For a moment, there was only noise, thunder, fire, and falling stone. Then, silence. The sky glowed orange, then faded back to gray. Mercer lay on his back, chest heaving, snow melting on his skin. Beside him, Elena sat up slowly, clutching the flash drive. Mercer glanced over. "You okay?" "Yeah," she panted. "You?" He managed a weak grin. "Been worse." They sat there in silence, the remains of Hayes's empire burning beneath their feet. Elena opened her fist. The flash drive was scorched, its casing cracked. But the light on its side still blinked faintly, alive. Mercer exhaled. "Looks like we've still got a war to fight." Elena's voice was quiet, but fierce. Not a war. A reckoning. The fire reflected in her eyes as she stared toward the east, toward Washington, where the real enemy waited. Snow still clung to Elena's jacket when she and Mercer reached the outskirts of Washington. The hum of the city felt unreal after the inferno they'd escaped. Traffic, sirens, life moving on as if nothing had burned beneath the mountains 2 nights ago. But for Elena, nothing felt normal anymore. She wasn't just a soldier on the run. She was the last witness to a secret powerful men had killed to bury. They arrived in the capital under false identities. Using forged credentials, Mercer had pulled from an old CIA contact who owed him favors. Every move they made was careful. Every step felt like it echoed through the walls of a city built on lies. For the first time since the war, Elena felt out of her element. Combat, she understood. But this quiet world of polished marble, briefcases, and cameras was a battlefield of a different kind. Mercer leaned against the grimy window of their rented apartment overlooking the Potomac. "You sure that drive still works?" Elena held the small, scarred flash drive between her fingers. It blinked. "That means data survived." He nodded. "Then we've got one chance left." "You said Hayes kept backups under her office?" "Sub-level 3, Elena replied. "Which means military-grade security, biometric locks, and surveillance everywhere." Mercer smirked faintly. "So, business as usual." Elena cracked a small smile, but said nothing. Beneath her calm, a storm brewed. The images from Hayes's files still haunted her, the children in foreign villages, the civilians marked as acceptable losses, the secret drone operations labeled under Project Lantern. Hayes had been just one head of a hydra, and Elena could feel the rest turning toward her now. The trap inside the city. By the 3rd day, they knew they were being watched. Elena noticed the same black sedan twice outside a diner. Mercer caught a man pretending to check his phone, but muttering into an earpiece. They changed locations 3 times in 24 hours. "They know we're here," Mercer muttered, sliding the magazine into his pistol. "But they're waiting. They want to see where we're heading." Elena zipped her jacket and slung her rifle case over her shoulder. Then let's give them something to follow. They moved through the city like ghosts switching subways, cutting through crowds, blending with office workers. Finally, they ducked into an abandoned parking structure near the Pentagon. Mercer parked a decoy car on level 5, then placed a small transmitter beneath it. They'll trace our signal to this spot. When they move, in-boom signal's gone. Elena gave him a sharp look. You're setting a trap? Not for them, he said, closing the trunk. For whoever sent them. He turned toward her, face hardening. You think this ends with Hayes? Look around, Brooks. The people pulling these strings wear suits, not uniforms. Elena's eyes narrowed. Then let's go cut the strings. Into the lion's den the next night. They approached the Defense Intelligence headquarters, a steel and glass fortress surrounded by guards and cameras. Elena wore a stolen security uniform. Mercer, posing as a maintenance contractor, carried a case filled with hacking tools instead of wrenches. They passed through the first checkpoint with falsified IDs Mercer had crafted. Inside, the corridors gleamed sterile white, the silence broken only by their footsteps. Every corner felt like it hid a lens. Sub-level access required dual authorization. Elena slipped a thin data cable from her sleeve, plugging into a wall terminal. Her fingers moved fast across the handheld device, decrypting the door's access code. 3 minutes, she whispered. Make it 1, Mercer replied, scanning the hall. Footsteps echoed 2 guards approaching. Mercer stepped out casually, pretending to check a panel. Evening, gentlemen. Maintenance, sub-level conduit test. The taller guard frowned. At midnight? System failure alert. You want the director yelling at you tomorrow? Mercer snapped. The guard sighed. Fine, make it quick. As they passed, Elena's device beeped softly. She yanked the cable free just as the lock light turned green. The heavy door slid open with a hiss. They slipped through, vanishing into the dark stairwell beyond. The sub-level truth. The lower floor was colder, older walls lined with file storage and biometric safes. The hum of servers filled the air. Elena's pulse quickened as she scanned for the coordinates Hayes had muttered. Under my office. Finally, they found it. A reinforced door marked classified, level 9 access. Mercer attached an explosive strip along the hinges. Step back, he said. The charge popped, sparks flying. The door fell inward with a metallic thud. Inside were dozens of drives locked inside transparent vaults. Elena stepped forward, eyes widening. This is it. Every operation, every target lists Lantern's whole network. She found the central console, inserted the damaged flash drive, and began the data sync. Lines of code filled the screen. Mercer scanned the files. Holy hell. This goes back 10 years. They used Lantern to eliminate anyone threatening private contracts, journalists, whistleblowers, even soldiers who asked questions. Elena swallowed hard. Hayes was right. She wasn't the only one. Then the monitor flashed red. Unauthorized access detected. Someone's onto us, Mercer said. The lights shifted to crimson. A mechanical voice echoed. Security breach in sub-level 3. Seal all exits. Elena yanked the drive free, clutching it tightly. We've got what we need, move. Chased by shadows, they ran through the dim corridors as metal shutters slammed down behind them. Gunfire erupted. A bullet shattered a fluorescent tube above Elena's head. Left, Mercer barked. They dove into a maintenance tunnel, sprinting toward a service hatch. Elena threw a smoke grenade behind them. The narrow space filled with gray haze, masking their retreat. Through the noise, she heard a voice over a radio. Director Reeves, targets confirmed, female sniper, and ex-Major Mercer. Orders? Another voice, cold, familiar, authoritative, replied. Alive if possible. The files must not leave this facility. Elena froze mid-step. She knew that voice. Reeves, she whispered. Hayes's replacement. Mercer gritted his teeth. And he's the one who signed our kill orders. They burst through a side exit into the freezing night. Helicopter lights swept the compound. Mercer pointed toward a drainage ditch leading to the river. Go! They dove in just as searchlights passed overhead. The roar of rotors filled the air. Elena clutched the drive to her chest, her heart pounding. When the lights faded, Mercer pulled her up. We can't keep running like this. We need help. Elena nodded slowly. Then we find someone who still believes in truth. An unexpected ally at dawn, they reached the outskirts of Arlington, slipping into an old safe house Mercer once used during covert ops. Inside waited a surprise, an older man in civilian clothes, tall, with gray hair, and a steady gaze. Mercer froze. General Mason. The man nodded. I heard you went dark, son. His eyes shifted to Elena. And you must be the sniper causing all this noise. Elena tensed. You working for them? Mason shook his head. Not anymore. Hayes and Reeves used Lantern to kill one of my men. That's when I started digging. When I heard about the mountain explosion, I knew who survived. He motioned to the laptop on the table. Plug it in. Elena hesitated, then inserted the drive. Mason's face hardened as the files opened. Good God, they've been running assassination programs on domestic soil. Reeves plans to bury it, Mercer said. And anyone who knows. Mason looked at them both. Then we take this to the one place he can't touch public eyes. I can get you 5 minutes of airtime on a national broadcast before they shut it down. Elena exchanged a look with Mercer. 5 minutes is enough. The decision that night, as the city lights flickered across the river, Elena sat on the rooftop, cleaning her rifle. The moon glowed faintly behind the clouds. Mercer joined her. You ready for this? She didn't look up. I've been ready since Afghanistan. He nodded. You realize once this goes live, we're done. No hiding. No second chances. Elena glanced at the drive, its faint blue light blinking like a heartbeat. They hunted me because I saw too much. Now they'll see it too. The wind carried the distant hum of helicopters. Somewhere, the government's finest were already moving to intercept them. Mercer exhaled. Then tomorrow, we end it. Elena stared across the dark city. No, she said quietly. Tomorrow, we begin. The early morning fog rolled over the rooftops of Washington, D.C., hiding Elena Brooks and Major Colt Mercer as they made their way toward the broadcast station. The city was still waking, traffic slow, unaware of the storm about to hit. For Elena, the quiet was almost unbearable. Every nerve in her body was tense, every thought focused on the files in her pocket. The truth, fragile and dangerous, waiting to be unleashed. Mercer glanced at her from the shadow of a building. You nervous? Elena smirked faintly, scanning the empty street below. No, focused. They slipped inside the station through a side entrance, avoiding cameras and security guards. Inside, the studio was bright, sterile, and deceptively calm. A single technician looked up from his console, startled to see two strangers moving with deliberate purpose. We need live access, Mercer whispered. No time for credentials. Elena approached the server bank, inserting the drive. The files transferred with agonizing slowness, each percentage tick on the screen a beat closer to exposure. 12, 35, 61, 84. Then a warning flashed. Intrusion detected, security breach. Elena cursed softly. Mercer spun, catching a movement behind the glass control room. Guards, well-trained, armed, and ready to protect the secrets Hayes and Reeves had buried for years. You didn't think it'd be easy, Mercer muttered, sliding behind a camera tripod. Elena drew her rifle from her back, checking the chamber. We finish this, now. The broadcast battle. The guards stormed in, weapons raised. Mercer fired first, suppressor hissing through the room. A shot rang out. One guard dropped. Elena moved in tandem, precise and lethal, a shadow dancing across the studio floor. Another guard went down as she vaulted over the news desk, rifle swinging in a fluid motion. The technician screamed. Mercer ducked behind him. Get to the control panel. Make sure the broadcast goes live. The man nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. Outside, the city remained oblivious, but inside, every second mattered. 3 more guards came at them from the stairwell. Elena dropped low, firing a controlled burst. One collapsed against the wall. The last guard dove behind the anchor desk, pistol raised. Mercer grabbed the man's wrist mid-motion, twisting, sending him sprawling into the studio lights. Blood glinted across the polished floor, but there was no time to hesitate. Elena's voice cut through the chaos. Files are live in 30 seconds. The director returns. A familiar voice echoed through the intercom system. Brooks, Mercer, I warned you. You can't stop this. Hayes, alive. Somehow she had escaped the Montana destruction. Her voice was calm, venomous. Elena's jaw tightened. You lied about dying, again. You're amateurs playing in a world you barely understand. Give me the drive. You know what happens if you don't. Mercer glanced at Elena. She's bluffing. But even a bluff can kill. Elena didn't hesitate. Let's end it. The studio doors burst open. Hayes herself entered, flanked by 2 new operatives, her elite kill team. They were fast, precise, trained for this exact moment. Elena fired first, taking cover behind the news desk. One operative went down instantly. Mercer tackled the second, using sheer force to disarm him. Hayes stood back, calm as a predator waiting to strike. Elena's heart pounded. For years, she had faced death abroad in mountains and deserts. But this, facing the architect of her trauma, in her own country, surrounded by innocent walls, was a reckoning. You can't win, Elena, Hayes sneered. This isn't your battlefield anymore. Elena whispered to Mercer. She's wrong. Mercer nodded, then turned to cover her while she moved to the control panel. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but her hands were steady. 98%, 99%, 100%. The broadcast went live. Every major network flickered, news tickers scrolling, classified government operations exposed, Operation Lantern files released. Screens across the country displayed photos, documents, emails, evidence of secret contracts, extrajudicial killings, and cover-ups spanning a decade. The final confrontation. Hayes lunged for the drive, but Mercer was faster. He slammed her into a wall, driving the breath out of her lungs. Elena swung her rifle, striking Hayes across the jaw. Blood streaked her lips, eyes wide with fury. Your lies end now, Elena said. Hayes's smile wavered. You think a few files change anything? I built this system. It survives me. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. Maybe, but it won't survive us. Hayes backed toward the exit, stumbling over cables. Mercer followed, holding her at gunpoint. The studio doors burst open. Security forces, alerted by the alarms, poured in. Hayes froze. Elena stepped closer. You're finished. For a moment, Hayes's eyes burned with defiance. Then she slumped, realizing the truth. No amount of manipulation could save her from the exposure now live across every network in the nation. Mercer cuffed her hands. Elena exhaled, a quiet mix of relief and exhaustion. The aftermath. The sun rose over Washington, as news anchors struggled to process the revelation. The files Brooks had released exposed an entire shadow network: rogue government operatives, secret contracts, assassinations, and cover-ups spanning continents. Public outrage erupted instantly. Investigations began. Several officials resigned. Hayes was taken into custody. Elena and Mercer watched from a rooftop across the Potomac. The city below buzzed with life, unaware of the war that had nearly consumed them. "You did it," Mercer said quietly. Elena shook her head. "We did it, together." Scout padded beside them, tail wagging. The dog had survived the mountain, the hunt, the city, a silent witness to it all. Mercer looked at her. "What now?" Elena thought of all the lost lives, all the missions, the betrayals, the men and women who had died in secret. "Now," she said, "we make sure it never happens again." Mercer nodded. "Then maybe there's hope." She held the flash drive up to the sunlight, its faint light blinking one last time before she handed it to Mason, their ally. "Let the world see." The river reflected the rising sun, glittering like shattered glass. Elena took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she felt free, not from the battles she had fought, but from the lies she had been forced to live. And though the world would never be perfect, for one moment, truth had won. The hunt was over. Elena Brooks had survived every shot, every betrayal, every death. She had faced elite killers, corrupt officials, and impossible odds, and emerged alive, vindicated, and free. The files would expose decades of secrets. The world would never forget the woman who refused to die quietly. And somewhere deep inside, Elena knew the forest, the mountains, the cold snow, and the shadows of her past would always be with her. But she had survived. And that was enough. The end